What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of our Midnight Madness series. My name is Tyler Fernandez, and I'm a senior client strategist on the Postscript Plus team. I help brands create epic texts and SMS strategies, and one of my all-time favorite brands to work with is Death Wish Coffee. Today, I'm joined by Kelly Spencer, who is the retention marketing manager at Death Wish and also the recipient of the SMS Marketer of the Year in 2022. Before we dive into all this great content, get excited because all attendees will be receiving some bonus content in their inbox, along with a recap of today's episode. We'll be tagging some folks in the chat who have won today's giveaway, which is some awesome Postscript swag straight from the archives. We'll be in touch with all our winners after that webinar. Kelly, tell us about Death Wish Coffee and why you decided to start sending texts as part of your marketing strategy.
Sweet. Well, thanks, Tyler. And I'm 1000% entering myself in to get that Postscript swag. Backstage, we were talking about all the cool merch that you guys dropped a couple years ago, and I'm hoping to see that again. But yeah, thanks for having me. I came on with Death Wish in 2020, and the brand had actually already been utilizing SMS, and we were, I think, one of the earliest adopters of Postscript specifically. So we've been with you guys for a minute, and they did have a pretty robust strategy at the time. All of the standard automations had already been put into place. There just wasn't necessarily, we'd essentially just been using it how we were using email, just copy and paste as far as what we were doing. And I think because at the time, nobody was totally sure how to recognize this as an individual channel where the same rules do not necessarily apply. But I was super excited coming on knowing that we did have the opportunity to do SMS here, coming out of where I was really kind of only doing email marketing, and knowing that there was an opportunity to act a little bit more human here, as presumed anyway. And that ended up being the case, which is dope.
So it's funny because I think Death Wish was one of the first brands I ever subscribed to on SMS, which is super dope. And I'm still obviously on the list today.
I'm going to check that after this, and my heart's going to be broken if that's not the case.
It's awesome.
Yeah, sweet.
So cool. So yeah, let's fast forward. So you're on the team, you crush it. It's crazy. If you had to describe what the voice of Death Wish is, what would you say?
Yeah. So it's funny because I think it's honestly evolved a little bit as we've grown. I'm going on about 3 years here now, and we've definitely kind of maybe not matured it, but elevated it a little bit. And we've definitely learned that through trial and error, where that line exists with our voice. If I had to personify it though, I think it's that super authentic friend you have that might come off as really direct and dry, even sarcastic, definitely sarcastic, but always humorous and ultimately wanting the best for you to empower you. And that might sound kind of cheesy, but there's definitely that dash of, that uncle that you never know what to expect from. I'd say I try to legitimately humanize this voice and this person in my head, and that's kind of how I see it. But it's that authenticity, I think, ultimately that's most important to us in our tone. And I think it becomes easy, especially with a brand like ours, to lean on certain scapegoats when it comes to our voice, being brash for shock value's sake. And it took me a while to recognize that too, because I totally love the opportunity that we have with our tone of voice to maybe be a little bit off the cuff and surprising, and sometimes just straight up messed up, but we've toned that down a little bit. And yeah, so it's just, I think ultimately authentic is the key word when it comes to what I'm striving for, when we're coming off anywhere in written word, verbally. So I think that's pretty much it. And it's towing that line. So I think finding where that line exists in terms of what's appropriate and still delivers the necessary message. We like to find exactly where that line is and just kind of stomp all over it. And luckily we have you too, who's fantastic at that. But yeah, long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, and I was going to say, you guys walk that line so well. I know we have a couple examples later in the webinar, but just wait and see. It's going to be crazy. But let's start at the top. So when you're working on a new marketing message, how do you differentiate by channel? How might you structure how an SMS sounds in comparison to how an email might sound?
So I think like it's the same for most brands. Like we try to keep it a little bit more buttoned up in email. The language is driven by like whatever the objective is, and then we have the real estate for way more visuals that help us kind of like direct that message home. But I think with SMS, like you have to consider the fact that you do have way less real estate to get the same important message across, but like it has to be engaging as well. And you have to do it in a way that's super short and impactful, which I think honestly some people think is like should be simple, but like as all of us know, I think it can be way more difficult than is perceived. But that's why it's the funnest channel to work in my opinion. Like you get the most to kind of create the most concentrated version of your brand in this space. But I think like we as humans do this in our own communication anyway. Like if I need to relay important information as clearly as possible, like you're definitely going to get an email from me, like, and I'm going to outline every single thing that is required. But if I want to just be human and engage and be real, like I'm going to blow your phone up. And I think the way we kind of structure that in SMS is using a little bit more of like humor and intrigue to get people to click so that wherever we're sending them can do the rest in terms of the heavy lifting of like articulating the message. Not clickbait in terms of like you're clicking something just because it's funny and then we're going to drive you to like a PDP and you're like, the hell, like why, what? It all needs to ultimately relate back, but being more engaging that way. And that all being said, though, I think like your email and SMS tones should still be like birds of the same flock, or like whatever kind of weird metaphor you want to use there. And I think it goes back to that authenticity, right? Like if I sign up for your emails and getting these like really dry like sales pushes and stuff like that, I might, number one, not be incentivized to give you any more of my information. But number two, like if I do sign up for your SMS marketing and you're like super casual, like, yo, what up or whatever. And I'm just going to be kind of confused about like who this brand is and what are they about. So I think like, again, I'm probably going to say this word like 654,000 times in this webinar, but like authenticity is most important. And then just kind of like buttoning it up a little bit in your more formal spaces like email and letting it all hang out in SMS.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So we really want to inspire people to consider creating a very specific voice over SMS.
Yeah.
So we know, like you said, we know texts are supposed to be more informal, how you text a friend or the out-of-pocket uncle, like you were saying before. Are there things you never say over text that you might say on the more formal channels, or vice versa? What can you get on SMS that you might not be able to on email?
Yeah, I think so. Like we would still use this channel to meet like any end we would for email, but I think we'd hands down do it in like a different way, right? Like that voice needs to be more engaging and in recognition of the fact that like as this like within the space of SMS, you have that opportunity for a more one-to-one communication. And therefore, like you should consider that. Like when I'm sending out an email blast, I'm sending it out to hundreds of thousands of people. And that's the same as the case for SMS, but it's going to land directly in your pocket. And like, you're going to open it up the same way you open up a text from your mom. Like, and I think that that's important. So I think things are a little bit different for a brand like ours in general, but I think, I think of email as the channel you communicate in the style you would at work with the focus in providing value and driving awareness. And I think of like SMS as the channel that you talk into the tone of voice that you would to your depraved group chat that you blow up after work. You know what I mean? Like it's gotta be real. And so I think that, yes, I think some of the examples we're going to get into later will also showcase stuff I wouldn't necessarily send in an email, but was able to kind of like squeak through via SMS. And then this is more just like a personal, like only in relation to our brand, but I have a little bit less oversight over my SMS strategy. So I can be like, we get a chance to do like a little bit more outlandish things. I think here as a testing ground too, like, did that offend people or to get them excited and they click like, and then being able to take that and use it also is like a justification for maintaining a voice like ours, because I think as we grow too, there's always going to be in any brand, there's going to be those pressures to start to like kind of like iron things down to the point of like just blandness and that just would never work for us. But this is a space that allows us to kind of like maintain the evidence that it's valuable.
Yeah, for sure. And I love how you said like testing. That's huge.
Yeah.
Always be testing. That's something I always tell, brands I work with, just like, don't be afraid to test.
Hell yeah.
So obviously we know your campaigns are fire. And again, we'll see some examples later in the webinar. But I want to take a look at your welcome series, because that's really the first interaction that a new subscriber has with Death Wish over text. So can you talk a little bit how you approach it and like your mindset going through it?
Yeah. I think for us, like, obviously we want to introduce people to that voice, like, first and foremost. So, in your welcome series is that first touch point. So you want to make sure that you're retaining that, that authenticity straight up front, because if you kind of don't lead with it and then all of a sudden insert it somewhere down the line where it feels more convenient, I think it comes off inauthentic. But yeah, so the objective of our welcome series and many is obviously it's to increase brand awareness as far as like what we're doing, showcase the things that are special about us and how we can provide value to our consumers. And yes, like obviously the ultimate objective too is like getting them over the hump of that first purchase. But I think doing so in a way that like showcases us as almost like thought leaders in our space, like drives trust. I think that those things are really valuable and sometimes get like can slip through the cracks. So we feature a lot of like content in our messaging. And the welcome series is one of the first places in which we do. So here's an example of like one, the middle text there is one where we're trying to showcase, people know us for having strong coffee, right? And I think that sometimes the perception of that can be that like it's chemically, you add chemical caffeine to it or something like that, and it can sometimes turn people off, or it scares people and they're just like, this stuff is jet fuel and I'm not down with it. But that's not the case. We're a fair trade brand, and that's super important to us. And we ensure like all of our farmers are receiving a livable wage for the product that we create. So we do so with the Robusta bean that has like more caffeine than your average Arabica bean. So it's a natural way of having a stronger cup of coffee. And like, we want to make sure that we're like putting information like that up front. And so that middle message kind of does that and drives to a blog versus a product page, and provides a little bit more information about us and like our ethos and our value system, which I think is like another thing that you want to make sure that you're doing in a welcome series. And that's also important to our voice. Like our voice is very much like ethically driven as well, because we as a brand are. So it's important to kind of fit that in there. And then using our like moving further down in the welcome series there, you'll kind of see like utilizing again that more like sarcastic dry tone, and like recognizing Mondays suck and offering a Monday suck discount. I think you can take like those things that you need to have standard in these automations and make them your own through your voice, right? Like, yes, you need to drive discount to trial and stuff like that. But like, do you need to be like, here's 15% off to try our product? No, not necessarily. How can you do it in a way that that will further introduce people to who you are and make them also feel like there's an ability to connect. So.
Love it.
And sometimes that stuff is hard to talk about because it's like ephemeral and it's not based in number necessarily. So it can sometimes be hard to justify too when you're trying to other people as far as why it's valuable. But you just asked about the welcome series, and I went in a different.
Above and beyond. Truly the GOAT. All right, so going back to the testing we were talking about earlier. So I know people often test formulas for emails or ad sets that they're running, trying to get the most out of it. Do you think there's a winning formula for a strong performing text? And if so, like what does it have to include?
Yeah, so I think it's probably different for different people, but I do think that there are some things that are like standard as far as being important. And I think for us anyway, strong performing text need to be really engaging in the preview. And I think too is the space, like when we first started working in SMS, like again, we were one of the early adopters. So like we didn't have as much competition in the feed in this thing. But now we do. And so making sure that preview text is really engaging and is going to drive people to be like, what? And open up is really important. It should be humorous whenever like humanly possible. And ideally, more obviously, it's going to drive people to want to drink more coffee in our case. So I think I see Our SMS message is usually in 3 succeeding parts. Yeah, perfect. So it's like the hook, the focus, and the intrigue. And these are just words that I made up, like in terms of this theory, but it's a process that didn't come about intentionally. It's just ultimately, to your point, through texting that we learned and ultimately evolved like what our messages look like. And not all follow this prescription, but most do. And I think the hook is that preview text that drives people to open, and then ultimately, so it's not clickbaity like we were talking about before. Like you still need to provide some type of like legitimate information in there so that like the click is earned and valuable. Otherwise, it's dead traffic. So giving that focus in the center of like actually providing that necessary information, and then the intrigue at the end just before the link is something that I think is maybe not necessary, but I like it, and it always kind of like it's just become kind of part of our strategy. I think it's like a CTA, but with personality, and a little bit less of an air of desperation, not that Shop Now is desperate, but it's also aggressive sometimes,
And boring.
It's boring. And it's been done. And we do it 24/7, especially in email. So and we don't have to do it here, which is why we don't.
It's funny that like I love the hook, the focus, and the intrigue. I like to look at it as like a hamburger or like whatever sandwich, if you will, if you're more of a sandwich person than a hamburger person. But it needs like the bun, the filling, and then obviously the bottom bun, because we're not doing open face sandwiches.
Hell yeah.
Same kind of thing. It needs like those 3 important parts to really drive it home. So I love that.
Yeah, and I am a hamburger person, just for your noggin.
Hamburger or cheeseburger?
Cheeseburger. Duh. Yeah.
Cool. So I know that Deathwish gets like a lot of text responses.
Yeah.
When you send out campaigns or even to automations or like whatever it may be, is there a consistent approach on how you communicate with customers over beyond just what's on the marketing calendar?
Yeah. So we unfortunately don't like respond back to all of our messages that we receive. Although sometimes like if I'm feeling like I need a little pick me up or a little bit of entertainment, I do love to scroll through some of the responses because they can be absolute gold. Should have shared screenshots of my favorites to bring here today, but I did not.
Yeah. I was sorry. I was going to say some people responses are insane. Some people send like grocery lists or like random stuff. Like sorry to go off topic.
No, that's okay, because I'm going to just further it. There was this one dude who had responded back to us, and he was very upset because, and I think we're going to see an example of it later on, we had done some maybe like sexually suggestive copy, and his wife, I think that maybe they were of the age where like text message marketing was just, it's like a newer concept. And his wife was super upset at his receival of this message. And anyway, we'll get to that later. But yeah, so we unfortunately just bandwidth wise, we can't like respond to our messages. And I know that's something that you guys offer now, which is like absolutely sick. I don't know how you do it with like real humans. But recently we've started to use the channel to help support our loyalty program. So we have like a VIP tier system that allows us to offer like different benefits based on kind of like the value of those people to us. And one of the at some of those higher levels, we wanted to introduce like the opportunity for some gamification, and it just to both drive home certain ends, right? Like ultimately we want people buying stuff, but also to provide value to them and to be just to create that brand love. I think for us, especially as we grow, like our e-commerce space is where we're really trying to drive home that brand love, and it gives us more room to play, I think, than like you have when you're doing retail sales and stuff like that. So so we have started to kind of play with that two-way communication more as of recently. And so worked that opportunity into like a campaign flow, kind of testing, asking our subs we do it in multiple ways. So outside of the loyalty option, we also just like test asking our subs what it is they look to see, and tagging them accordingly. So that's something we did testing in a welcome series a while back, just kind of like as people are coming in, like, do you want to receive like more sales related content or recipe related content or something, and allowing people to kind of like choose your own adventure in terms of what we're going to be sending to you. So I think that's two of the ways in which we're using that two-way communication. I think we'll get into that loyalty piece a little bit later, but yeah, wherever we can, like, because in real life, like conversations that are one-sided suck. And I think the same goes for conversations with brands. So wherever you can humanize and give people the opportunity to like give their opinion and give their thoughts back is of value. And you can only like you can do that with other channels, but like it's absolutely easiest in this space.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, obviously today's webinar is meant to drive inspiration and encourage marketers to really think outside the box. So we've been talking about it all webinar. We're gonna do like a top 5 of our like all-time favorite campaigns we've worked on together. I'm gonna pull like 2 of mine, pull a couple of yours, and we'll talk through them, kind of like the ideas, what inspired it, our thought process, and all that. So,
hell yeah,
let's kick it off.
Oh, this one, dude, you killed this copy. I remember when you shared this one over. I mean, isn't anything you want to say about it? Because I'll just start ranting.
Yeah, real quick, I'll just say, so yeah, this was obviously like in the age of when like, what is it, like the chat GPT was like just everything. It was like just owning everything. Like it was all over Twitter, all over social media. So I figured, yeah, like why don't we get trendy and like kind of tie in something funny with it? So that's kind of what birthed it. And I think, I don't know, was this a launch or maybe just like a highlight?
Yeah. I think that this one was a re-promo post-launch to non-purchasers, if I remember correctly. Like, I don't think it was our launch text, but it was definitely like re-promo text.
Yeah. So yeah, just tying that in, like fun CTAs, talking about like the Matrix, everything that has to do with like AI and like crazy stuff. I thought of it and just put it together. So yeah, this was a fun one for sure.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome. I remember like you said, the timing of it was really ideal. And I think the timeliness of it made it hit so hard. And it was the perfect copy for this product for us, which is like it's a super handcrafted, like literally hand churned in rum barrels by 2 dudes down the road. Like not 2 dudes, they work for us and it's at our warehouse, but, and we do it in really small batches. So like it was also like just really matched the copy well. And it was one of those things where like all the parts were fitting. But I think like it's an instance where recognizing that other channels like social can be pulled into your strategy as far as like inspiring them. And that's what you did here. I feel like taking that timely trending opportunity that was happening with Chat GPT and I was gonna say B2B, whatever. And working it in here again in that preview text too, that's like super engaging and kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger of like, oh shit, I want to see what more is going to be shared here. So loved that one, loved it.
Right on.
Ooh, this guy. Oh yeah, so this is the one I was kind of referencing before about like taking advantage of the 2-way street that we have with SMS. And so this is new for us and it's something that we're going to be doing on a more recurring basis, but we were highlighting a really high value segment to us and wanting to gamify an opportunity with them and see how it did as far as just giving them randomly like a discount for a product. So here we have, excuse me, I'm burping. Got it. Okay. So taking on like the persona of like a 70s game show host, we shared, we wanted this new kind of recurring campaign flow to be called Name That Flavor, and where we have some like wild product reviews that are likely written after people drink an excessive amount of our product. But anyway, so we have this running list of all these reviews that we use for different things. And we saw them working really well in some of our paid efforts. And so wanting to pull some of that in here and play with it, and created like a gamified opportunity with it where we showcase, one of the reviews and give this particular segment of people the opportunity to try to apply the right product to the review and guess which it is. And then if they get it right, there we go. Yeah. When they get it right, they get a higher discount. And if they don't, you still get something. Hopefully nobody who receives this is watching this webinar, but you're going to get a discount no matter what. But yeah, so, and again, I think that like that opportunity to use it as more than just like, here's something from us, but like as the form of communication that it is that allows for response, it's worked out well for us. And this particular one actually, like little insight into just like absolute human error. This had a 44% click-through rate straight through to the end of the flow, but I think it would have been even more successful. I had forgotten to turn off our automatic message for replies that basically says like, sorry, we don't reply to messages. So I sent a text out, asked for a response, immediately told everybody, sorry, we don't accept responses, but people still followed through to the end, luckily. And it received a lot of engagement. So,
this is such a good idea. When I saw this, I ran to the team and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is maybe the best thing I've ever seen.
Well, I'll do it better next time because I'll pull you in and not make the dumb mistakes like I did when I built it out. So,
and I love how that is like an actual real life review.
Oh yeah.
Like that is so
real
funny.
Good ones in there. We'll have some more flowing through for sure, but that's one of my favorites as well.
That's so funny. Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, dude.
This is great.
Do you even need to say anything? It's like bathroom humor is always going to be priceless. And we happen to have
the coffee because we all know after that morning cup, it's a routine, right?
It's routine, and it's usually the best of the day. And then, I mean, just saying, but yeah, I think I first of all, I just like love working for a brand that allows me to talk about poop as much as I want. And also to get to work with Tyler, who writes amazing texts about poop when I'm like, hey, here's a blog about poop. But I think it's just like, it's not just about the language and tone that you use. Like, this is obviously super funny, like, and the focus of it is to be humorous, but ultimately, like, here we're utilizing content in our strategy. And that originally was kind of, I don't think it's necessarily something people do too often with SMS because it can be a slightly pricier channel, right? Like, I can blast out an email message to tons and tons of people for a very low cost and drive to a blog, and I can afford to do so, drive them to like a non-immediately purchasing page. Whereas like you might not want to do that with your SMS marketing all the time. You might always want to drive it to a product because we don't want to create barriers to getting to that place. But at the same time, I think like consideration, we have to consider the consideration period. And I think this is an example of that. And ultimately using content in our SMS strategy came out of like a bandwidth issue, like just being the person working on our retention strategy from email and SMS solo. It just got a little busy, and keeping up with the consistent cadence of our content-based emails and our newsletter, just bandwidth-wise, it was becoming a problem. But I was like, oh, like SMS is a space where it's not going to, like, the lift to do that is minimal. And from what we learned, the value is extreme. So this is one of my favorites for sure, both in content and just like in concept as far as how it came to life. So
yeah. And I think you guys specifically, you have such good blog posts. Like, your content is so good. Like, this is intriguing. Like, the answer did surprise me. Like, I
was gonna say, do you read the blog when you write?
I do. I dive in. I read the whole thing. It's crazy.
Awesome.
So yeah, this one was fun. I was a big fan of this one.
Yeah. So this I wanted to include just because it was one of our top performing flows of 2022, which is probably of no surprise, right? Like, you've got those like tried and true ones that are always going to be heavy earners for you. But I think that if you infuse your brand voice into those things that are always going to be standard and commonplace, then like the potential for them becomes exponential. So we did that here with our browse abandonment flow. And I think also keeping in mind that these are messages that your audience is going to be getting on a recurring basis. So they can get stale super quick, and needing to like replace and update that language pretty regularly. And as your tone evolves too, just making sure that it's keeping fresh. But I wanted to include it because it's like not one of those like more like sexy fun ones, but at the same time, like it's where sometimes like your voice becomes most important.
Yeah, for sure. I love that.
Yes. Oh, dude, this one was fun.
Another banger.
Yeah, I feel like we're showing our full hand right now. It's like poop in your mama jokes. That's pretty much our SMS strategy. If anybody wants to cop it. But while it's like, it's always been inherent in the tone of Death Wish to like retain some level of humor. We've also had like audience research done that helps us substantiate it. So like our people like to laugh, which means I can legitimize things like your mama jokes in our SMS strategy, which is freaking great. But that's why also devising a brand tone is so important. I think it like requires getting to know your audience and figuring out like how best to be their homie, like ride or die. And what do they like? How do they live? How can we best accompany them on that journey and make sure that it's engaging? Yeah, this was a fun one.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's supposed to be commonplace knowledge, like how big the earth is, but at the time I didn't. So it was educational too.
Yeah. We're packed full of educational stuff.
Dude, yeah, exactly. I'll share the poop blog link with everyone here in case they're curious about why it happens. But anyway. Oh, cool. Let's see. Which was the affogato recipe. Yes. Yeah, dude. This one is great. I think like for us, recipe content's always a winner. We have a product that it makes sense for. But also this one came out on a weekend during that heat wave this past summer that we had. So like, again, timeliness was hitting. And I think those are things to consider too. You can't just like template this kind of stuff and like let it run. Like stuff is happening in the world that we can be a part of and you can help integrate like your brand in through your voice. So this one was just like, I think successful because of that, like, you know, good language, ice cream, coffee, and timeliness. So just work those 4 things in everything you do. It's gonna be solid.
Exactly.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the holidays. Oh man, I miss those sweaters. Yeah, so like December is tough, I think, for brands, or at least it can be for us, like coming off of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, heavy discounting and sales like through November. And as we all know, like Black Friday just gets larger and larger. It's like the thing from Ghostbusters, but so like that time period is like expanding, which then makes, can make December even more difficult to kind of get people to convert during. So coming off of that time period, I think that's when brands have like a real opportunity to humanize themselves. And especially like brands who have already done that have a distinct advantage because I think you can like authentically reach out to your audience and engage them outside of sales pushes by providing value in whatever way makes sense for your brand and your audience. And inevitably you have some residual sale from that. I think like this ended up driving, I think about 50 orders, which can seem extremely incremental and potentially insignificant. But when you're doing this on a regular basis and have generated that trust, incremental becomes expansive,
Yeah. And again, driving to a piece of content. So I think don't be afraid to really dive into the content, especially like I said, you guys have great content. So it just makes it a no-brainer.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I think, people aren't expecting it necessarily either when they're opting in to receive marketing from a brand. So if you can work it in naturally, it's super valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, this one surprised me because I was just like in preparation for this, I pulled like, a report of our campaigns from last year. I was just kind of like poking through different metrics to see like what had really killed it. And this was one of our top 5 campaigns from last year. And it lands at a blog, which I think is significant. I'm going to assume that maybe a little bit of that success is related to like it being close to another message in terms of attribution, but I don't think it's enough to say that it's the reason this did so well. I think it's has to do with a lot about the audience that we sent it to. So the strategy behind this, if I remember correctly, was to re-engage non-buyers of a flavor that we had just relaunched for the year. And so these are the people who had engaged with that message, but had not purchased. And we were re-engaging them with, instead of driving them back to that product, offering them a recipe and or pushing a little bit more opportunity for consideration and getting them over to the website, I think is most important. So yeah, I think this speaks to the value of content and developing a voice that can authentically deliver content. I think it speaks to just the ultimate value of that for sure.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
So I think we have one more slide, and the last slide isn't a campaign automation, but it is a couple like in the wild moments that we wanted to share.
Yeah. So the picture on the left, as well as the top one on the right over here, that's in like an in-thread text message. This was a screenshot from somebody that I work with. And a friend of theirs had texted. So basically the text on the left is the text that was sent out. And one of their friends must have been opted into our messaging. And I don't remember who wrote this, you or I, Tyler, but the preview text was you down for a quickie. I think it was like a flash sale that we were doing or something like that. It might've been the one that the dude from earlier's wife was super pissed at. But anyway, somebody like texted them, my friend from who works here, and said like, did you write this? Whoever did this did a great job setting it up so only that first little bit of text shows, you know what I mean? And they laughed. And like, I think it seems insignificant to share potentially, but like how often do you like forward, maybe in our space it's different because we all work in marketing, but like how often do you, this person doesn't like forward along something that you saw because you found it so engaging. So I think it just kind of showcases how these things can ultimately kind of like capture eyes, and that's what we're trying to do. And then that other example there on the bottom is another one. It was just one that came across on Twitter. Somebody sharing some of their favorite brands to follow via SMS. And I think the only reason, that we're listed on there has a lot to do with the voice that we're bringing to the table and that level of authenticity. So yeah, I just wanted to share a couple of those.
So good. The GOAT, we're telling you, she's
it's you, man.
All right, so we have some time for a few questions from the audience. So we won't be able to get to all of them. I think we have quite a bit, but we do have time for a few.
Cool.
So let's get this kicked off. So from Amy, these texts are really long. Is the length of copy something that has been tested for Death Wish?
Yeah, I think this is something we can both take. Tyler, you remember, I think that poop text was one that we actually did an A/B test on, long text copy versus short. I can't remember. Do you remember which one did better?
I want to say the longer one did.
I'm pretty certain it did too. And I feel like to answer your question, like, yes, we've done this. And part of the reason our texts are so long is because I'm showing you a perfect example of it right now. Brevity is difficult for me. So being in writing SMS copy, sometimes it can be a little long-winded, but yeah, I think depending on the voice that you're bringing to the table, you do have more ability to say more in a text. So like if you're being engaging and humorous, I think you have a little bit more room to express yourself. I think that if you have this super long drawn out text message about, sales information or something like that is not going to hit the same. So again, I think you have to think about what the message is, and then like length should kind of correlate. Round two.
All right. From Michael, I would like to hear more about how to balance soliciting SMS subscribers versus email subscribers. I actually turned off Postscript for a moment because I had too many pop-ups on the website, and I've gone hard with Klaviyo email flows.
Yeah, Michael, understandable. So we actually, we utilized and we tested this. Our pop-up on our website for both email and SMS opt-in is through Postscript, and we had A/B tested, like putting our email capture forward or our SMS capture forward, and found that like ultimately, I think putting email forward generated more signups, but we got more follow through on both with like having both of them or in that single pop-up. So I don't know if you have different pop-ups, one for SMS and one for email, I would definitely like suggest integrating them. And anytime that you can get an email address, if you can like squeeze a phone number out of that, I think you definitely should. Again, like for us, I see what you're saying and the value in that too, obviously, because it's cheaper to blast out via email. But I think that you have that opportunity to segment and get really like specific in terms of like how you talk to people through SMS. So like if you can, you should still try to like grab that information if you can. But again, I would integrate that pop-up if you are using two. I don't I hope that
Perfect.
helped. Yeah.
All right, Priscilla, as a copywriter, I sometimes struggle with creating that hook and intrigue when the topic I'm writing about is boring. What are some tips for spinning a click-worthy hook out of snooze-worthy content?
Ooh. You clearly can write copy. Like I should.
That's a good question.
Yeah. That's a great question because I mean, like, we're not always sending like really interesting stuff either, and sometimes you just gotta like, talk about your product or something, or like those things like taste. I need to say delicious, smooth, dark roast coffee, but like, how do you say that without sounding like a robot? And I think it's finding like maybe like the one human element and like what it is you're trying to say, and like expanding in that one single thing. And even if it's like only relevant tangentially, I think that's where you use it in the preview. And then like we said, the meat comes a little bit after that. But I think even if it feels kind of like ridiculous to start testing like in that preview text, something maybe a little bit more outlandish than you might usually, so long as you're still providing like you're not doing it in a way that like I said, like is kind of clickbaity. Like the content of the SMS should still have like the beef of what you're trying to say, but like right there, I think is where you can get kind of weird. But as far as like TikTok can be really inspiring just in terms of like trending content and seeing if there's something that can be used, like that AI generated example that we showed where that you can pull something like that in. I think that's one way to kind of like start wiggling into writing something like that. And also just like copy, I understand can be, it's takes time. And I think too, it's like always an afterthought for people who don't have to do it. Like copywriting, we know is like super difficult and often like an undervalued aspect of the strategy. But afford yourself the time to like dig into it for real. And because it's super valuable, but yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, right on. Cool. We'll take one more question.
Cool.
Let's see. From Chad. How often are you sending campaigns? What segment are you sending these style of messages to? Full list, engaged, etc.
Yeah. So the more content focused emails are the twofold. So like we definitely use a more engaged segment to share those things with, but then also it's like it's a great lapsed customer opportunity. Like if they haven't purchased, like sending them more texts of your stuff is not necessarily going to do the job. So we also will recognize like some of those like win back opportunities and push out one of these more content focused pushes to them. So it's kind of both. And like I said, we worked it into our welcome series as well. So everyone that comes into our bucket is like starting to get introduced to that content. And I think it's a value at some point to make sure that they're all getting it back from us again. So it's not like, something we show up front, but then like they never see from us again. But to answer your question, yeah, the more ridiculous and more fun ones are definitely going to go to our engaged segments, because they're the people that we know once we get them to the website have a tendency to convert. But it's a great win back opportunity as well, I think, especially if you're segmenting based off of like, for us, there's, dark roast, medium roast, light roast, or by format. Like, is there a valuable piece of content that you can relate back to how they may have previously engaged with your brand by way of purchase? I think that's, sharing with those segments as well is super valuable.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have. That's all we have today. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Big shout out to Death Wish and obviously the GOAT, Kelly Spencer, sharing some knowledge bombs with us. Join us next week for an advanced lesson in automations with Joanne from Jones Road Beauty. Something you won't want to miss. I promise you that. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.